Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of TJ's Thoughts. This is a show where I give my opinion about TV shows, movies, web series, basically anything that's not like a game. And this episode is actually going to be about the recent Rent live performance. Fox does these things fairly regularly now, where they will take a stage show and perform it live with varying amounts of liveness, and it's always interesting, but I'm a huge believer in the idea that we need to support theater with as much as things like Hamilton has kind of brought theater back into the spotlight for years and decades even. Theater was kind of just for theater nerds like me. And was completely eclipsed by film and television in popular culture. And while it's getting a bit of a resurgence with people like Neil Patrick Harris and Hugh Jackman, I still believe very strongly that we need to support theater as much as we can. And these live performances of shows, in theory, are a great way to do that. In practice, Fox has this issue where, despite the fact they're doing a theater show that, like Rent is one of the most popular theater Broadway musicals of all time. It was made into a movie where most of the cast were the Broadway originals. They only lost Mimi was different, and I believe Joanne was different. But it was really well received, and it started this kind of resurgence of turning music and making musical films. So please excuse me, for some odd reason I just have something in my throat. Much better. All right. So, yeah, I think one of the first, if not the first, TJ's Thoughts was about one of the live shows, and I try to do this as much as I can, but boy, was I upset with Rent. I'll go into specifics in a second here. I have 4 pages of typed notes. Because while I was watching it, I was taking notes so I wouldn't forget anything. And yeah, there's just so much. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to go through my notes, which is basically done kind of stream of conscious as I was watching the show. So we'll go through the show as I go through my different things. The big thing that I mentioned in my notes, but I'll mention it now, is Rent live, for the most part, wasn't live. There was an issue with the character that played Roger. He broke his foot and was not able to actually perform it live. So the majority of the show was actually their dress rehearsal from the night before, and only about the last 10-15 minutes ish of it were actually done live, and they actually had to reblock certain things so that Roger didn't have to move because he had a broken foot. So that definitely hurt them because we were seeing a dress rehearsal, not a live performance, and things go wrong in dress rehearsals. But my background, I've done I think 24 shows. The majority of them were musicals, but I've done straight plays as well. I love theater. I loved being on stage. So I know what dress rehearsals are like, and even for a dress rehearsal, there's some stuff. So let's start off in the beginning of the show. The first song is, oddly enough, called "Rent." And the first thing you notice is that the cast is doing something that a lot of people that are unfamiliar with how theater works. This is a very common mistake, or live performance in general. And I think it's best illustrated actually by something my brother said to the band I was in. A common joke that you'll make with like your sound guys and that's what my brother was doing at the time, as he was filling in as our sound tech, was you go, "Hey, make sure we sound good," and he immediately launched back with, "I actually can't make you sound good. I can only make you sound accurate. You have to sound good, and I'll make sure they can hear that." And that's something that a lot of performers that have never performed mic'd on stage forget about. Is that, yes, you have a microphone that will make you louder and can fix certain things. But if you're not giving a good performance, if you're not projecting, if you're not supporting your voice, you're just going to sound really weak and loud, not like you're singing well. You're just going to sound like a louder person singing poorly. And that was a problem I saw with almost every cast member, was they just simply were not supporting their voice. They were singing very softly and counting on the mic to be able to get them out to the audience, and it doesn't work that way, and it just comes off bad. The first thing you notice is actually the balance was off the entire show, and you notice it right in the beginning because the band overpowered the cast. You couldn't hear them singing the song over the band, which was not great. And another thing that really upset me, because the character is so great, the actress playing Angel could not sing very well, or at least couldn't for most of the show. There are a few things that I'll mention in here where she really just comes into her own and does really well. But her introduction, she can't hit the pitches right. Her voice cracks. It just doesn't work very well. And throughout this whole thing, I'm going to be mentioning their character names, not the actor names, just to keep things coherent for me. So Angel comes in, has pitch problems. Her falsetto is just really bad. And that's the introduction to her character, and it just didn't come off well. The guy playing Roger, the original Broadway performer, and the guy that played it in the movie is a gentleman named Adam Pascal, and he's amazing. He really is. But he has this really interesting thing when he gets really emotional while he's singing. He has this nice gravelly growl that just naturally happens whenever he starts getting really emotional, and it adds to the character really well. The guy playing Roger in Rent Live just came off like he was imitating Adam Pascal over and over. He would put this growl into his voice, but it didn't sound natural. It sounded very forced. And because of that, you'll hear me mentioning him imitating Adam Pascal, or just calling him fake Adam Pascal, because that's what it comes off as. Now, it's possible that was his natural voice, but because he wasn't supporting it, because he wasn't confident in his singing, it came off as he was imitating another actor playing his part, which you never want to do. If you're playing a part that someone else has played, you have to make it your own. And it just felt like he wasn't. He was a poor man's Adam Pascal. Mark had the same issue, though he wasn't imitating Anthony Rapp, who played Mark in the film and on Broadway, but he just was not supporting his voice. And he would get lost behind the orchestra. And this is all just during Rent, the first number. Mark can't hear him, and the few times he can, it's not supporting it, so he sounds like really weak, and it just doesn't make sense. There are parts in Rent where you have these people drumming on pipes and stuff in the background, part of the chorus. They couldn't drum in time, so instead of hearing this like ta 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 or something like that, you just get this pop, and it brings you out of the show when you see things like that. The other thing that was interesting until it wasn't was they did this in Theater of the Round, which means that they have audience all around them, and they actually had these like little pits in the stage, because the stage was really interesting and the design was really cool, and they had little patches of audience everywhere, and right next to the center of the stage they had these pits that the audience would stand in, and the stage would be about like here to them. And so you have these people standing literally right next to the actors. And the actors are coming through during Rent and giving them high fives and that. And then the audience would like scream randomly during the show, which would completely cover up the actors. Very much like a rock concert where the audience just start screaming in that. But that's not how theater works. You don't scream in the middle of songs. You let the actors do their stuff, and then you applaud at the end of the song. And it happened over and over again. Rent was the first time it happened, but it just over and over, you'd lose everything because you just listening to these audience members screaming their heads off. So we did that. Like I said, the set was really cool. It was utilized super poorly. I really think that set with a different director could have been super cool. They didn't use it right. Mimi comes in during the song Light My Candle, and she has the same problems that the other actors have. She's relying on the mic. She's not supporting her voice. She's pitchy, where she's not hitting the right notes and stuff like that. With how bad it was, part of me thinks, because all of them were wearing in-ear monitors, which if you're not aware, when you're singing on stage in a large room like that, and you have audience and everything, you can't actually hear yourself. And if you wait to hear you on the loudspeakers, you get an echo and it's delayed. So in theater, you have these things called monitors that basically pump everything back to you. And there's a bunch of different ways to do it. I'm most familiar with using what are called floor monitors, which are just speakers that are pointed at the cast. They're generally at the front of the stage. They're pointed at the cast so you can hear yourself and you can correct pitches. These guys were using what are called in-ear monitors, which are just they're little earplugs basically that pump everything back in so that you can hear yourself sing. Because without that, your voice just goes out and it's lost in orchestra and audience and everything else, and you can't actually hear your own pitch. So with how bad the pitches were with almost everyone, part of me thinks it was at least partially because their monitors were not set up correctly, and issues with balancing and the tech side of this were rampant that I'll mention in here over and over again. So that might have had something to do with it, but you still have actors that were not supporting their voice, were not projecting. It was really obvious to someone that has done theater and has seen people do that and has done it themselves more than once, that they weren't performing well. The first time Roger actually shows that he's not just a poor man's Adam Pascal is he does do a different take on one of the lines in Light My Candle. Mimi is crawling on the floor and she goes, "They say that I have the best ass below 14th Street. Is it true? You're staring again." And that's when Roger goes, "No, I mean, you do have a nice, you look familiar." And Roger has a very different take on it. And it was cool. It was interesting. I personally like Pascal's take on it. and that kind of awkward. Well, whereas Roger in this show was a lot more confident and flirty with it. It was a choice. I didn't like it, but it worked, and it was the first sign of life for Roger. There's also a part where Roger's supposed to blow out the candle because they're flirting. He couldn't do that. It took him like 4 tries going, and the candle was right here. She was like, it's rather humorous, and that's live theater because things that you've done a million times will go wrong. So that was just kind of humorous. I mentioned already, all the actors seem like they're relying on the mics to give them quality. It's not how it works. And then right after Light My Candle, the audience or the cast came on and said, "Hey, this isn't live." Apparently, they tweeted about it before it was actually live. I missed that because I was avoiding spoilers in that, so I didn't know that I wasn't watching an actual live taping. I was watching a dress rehearsal until after Light My Candle. So the next thing you have Mark and the actor that played Mark just had this issue where sometimes he'd be very realistic and in the moment, and other times he just felt like he was overacting and putting on a show instead, or not really putting on a show, but just projecting all of this unnecessary fake emotion instead of playing a role and letting his real emotions bleed through his character. So I saw that quite a few times. It was most noticeable right before Today for You. Today for You is Angel's first song. It is one of her best songs. It's such a cool song. Angel can't sing throughout the entire song. She just pitchy. Her voice cracked over and over. And anytime she hit falsetto, it was always raw and rough and the wrong pitch. And it was just really, really upsetting to see such a great part just get murdered due to bad vocals. Now, she did do a lot of kind of speak singing where she wasn't singing it, she was just speaking in rhythm. And those parts were really good. The actress that played her was not a bad actress. She just couldn't sing at all. And so that was really upset. And then the other thing, Angel is a drummer. In Today for You, she does some drumming. She goes, it's not an incredibly difficult rhythmic thing. Like, you don't have to be a master drummer to do it. They did not give her sticks. She mimes drumming, but she doesn't actually have sticks or drum, and it's such a simple beat that anyone that understands the just beginning of how rhythm works could have learned it in a few weeks. And anyone that was fairly talented with music and rhythm and instrumentation would have no problem. I am not a drummer. I can play Angel's part. So that was upsetting. And then the end of Today for You was really painful because, again, Angel couldn't sing, and it just hurt. The next, you get the introduction to the character of Benny, and he has this great little feature called You'll See. And Benny can't sustain his notes. It's like he wasn't taking deep enough breaths, and so every one of his notes, he would sing, "You'll see, boys, you'll see, boys," and you'll have these really long, pretty holds that never made it. Halfway into Boys, it would cut off because he'd run out of air. And it happened every single time. He just wasn't breathing correctly, and it came off as he was a really weak vocalist. And again, he had the same problem as all the other actors, which was they were relying on their mics, and they weren't supporting and projecting their voice. And in that song, Angel kept hitting sour notes. Roger keeps doing this fake growl-ish thing to sound like Adam Pascal, and it just is not getting better. Then what happens is Mark goes over to help fix some sound for Maureen's protest thing, and the set is still super cool. Like, it's just amazing. And so he walks through the audience to another part of the set, and then you do the Tango Maureen. They had to change lyrics because they have things like the beginning goes with, "This is weird, it's weird, really weird, fucking weird." They can't say fucking on TV, so they changed some things around. It didn't work. It would have been better if they just said freaking weird instead of fucking. But no, they changed it to like super weird, and it was like, no, this just isn't good. Joanne, throughout Tango Maureen, was having a lot of problems with the high notes and her falsetto. She had a pretty good kind of belty range, but once she got into falsetto and her higher notes in general, it was just bad. She would, her voice would crack pretty regularly, and the harmonies between Mark and Joanne were just weird. Mark would hit his notes fairly well. Joanne would kind of hit her notes, but her volume would drop so drastically, and her breath support would just go non-existent, that it was almost like she was whispering her notes, and it just didn't work. And then the big part of Tango Maureen is there is a tango break. And this is a really cool thing because the tango is a cool dance. It was horrid. They were on a tiny little part of the stage. They didn't have the full stage to use. They had this tiny like 6 foot by maybe 10 foot area. Half of it was covered with props and things like that. And they didn't even use all of the other half. And the tango just looked bad. And it's a great part of the show because Joanne makes, if you're not familiar with dancing, you have a lead and a follower, basically. And generally, the man is the one in the lead position. And Joanne makes Mark take the follower position. And the weird thing about being in the follower position for any ballroom dancing is you do everything that the leader does backwards. And so it's really weird, and it's a cool little thing, and it was just horrible in the show. And the cast kept getting overpowered by the music again and again. After that, they cut to what's called Life Support, which is this support group for people with AIDS, which is one of the major themes of the show is the AIDS epidemic and how people dealt with it. In this kind of bohemian part of New York in the early 90s. Life Support is this brilliant, the song itself is called Will I, and it's this really brilliant, beautiful, poignant song, and it comes off pretty good. And then Mark comes in and ruins it, because you had the chorus sitting there, and they were singing really well, and then Mark comes in with his pitchiness and not supporting his voice, and it ruins everything. And then they have a couple different solos in the Life Support scene, and they were pitchy, they were cracky, people were not hitting the notes. And then it goes over to Out Tonight, which is Mimi's feature, and we get the same problem. She's overpowered with the music. They had cameras that would kind of walk around on stage to get these weird angles, and this was a problem through most of the show. A normal stage production is designed to be seen by the audience. This show, you would have the view from the audience for parts, and then you would have these weird, running camera shots where they would have like a gimbaled camera, and it would go in and get really close, and it would follow them in these weird things, and it was awkward. It wasn't a film. It wasn't a stage show. It was this really weird hybrid of both types of shooting that didn't work. Mimi did a technique that, if I remember correctly, it's a vocal technique or a music technique, actually, because you can do it vocally or instrumentally. It's called rubato, and what it is you slow down, the accompaniment for what you're performing stays the same and keeps the same meter, but you will slow down and speed up your part of it. Mimi tried to use some rubato, and turned out really bad. She slowed down too much, and then at the end of the musical phrase, she had to catch up and just shove all the words in as quickly as she possibly could. And it came off just bad. And then at the end of Out Tonight, her pitch screws up and her voice cracks, which just happens over and over. Again, pitch issues might be related to the monitors. Voice cracking is bad singing. That's all it is. Roger has a really cool song called Another Day, where Mimi comes in and flirts with him, and then he gets all angry because he has his own issues. And it's a very angry song where he keeps telling her, who do you think you are, barging in on me and my guitar, little girl, hey, the door is that way. It's this really cool song. No emotion from Roger. You could hear a little of it in his voice because he was imitating Adam Pascal, who did it beautifully. But there's nothing in his stance, in his arm movements, nothing. He was just there. And it was so boring to watch. And then Mimi comes in with this really cool part. It goes, there's only us, there's only this, forget, regret, all life is yours to miss. And it's a really pretty counterpoint that she sings over Roger's Another Day. And she jumps into falsetto, and the falsetto is just horrid. Not supported, very, very weak and breathy. It just wasn't good. The other thing, and this is just a vocalist thing, when you have something that ends in an ER, when you're singing it, you generally will not sing the note as an and finish it off like that. You'll do the vowel before it. Mimi didn't. Like, all of her sustained notes were and it just didn't sound good. It's a stylistic choice. I don't think it was a good choice. Another note of fake Adam Pascal. At the very end of Another Day, Roger finally looks like he's getting into it, because you have this really cool counterpoint melody going on. It's really cool. Finally, Roger gets into it, and you can see some anger and anguish, because it's a really powerful song. So that was nice. And then the last note of the song, Mimi comes up and like caresses him, and then Roger grabs her hand, and then she yanks it away angrily, and it just looked wrong. Like, it looked so forced and so out of place when the rest of the song, Roger was a zombie and Mimi was just kind of almost crying throughout. And it was weird. And then it goes to back to life support, and you see another Will.I solo, and out of tune, voice cracked. It wasn't good. There were parts where the actors would actually walk through, like that pit where there was audience standing there. The actors would actually use that and would walk through the audience, which I thought stylistically was really cool. And again, the set was such an interesting, unique look for a set, that was a perfect way to utilize it. And there was so much promise to that set that they never used, because they kept trying to shoot it like it was a movie. And then randomly going, oh wait, no, we're in theater, so we have to do this as a theater. And it was just weird. There is a section of Will.I that turns into what's called a round, which is where you have different people technically singing the same song, but at different parts. And so they all start at different places, and it's a really cool thing. It sucked so bad. It was so bad. It wasn't like normally you get these really beautiful harmonies and things like that. It wasn't. It was just this cacophonous bunch of noise where they were just trying to sing over each other, and people were hitting the wrong notes and the wrong rhythms, and it was just bad. They do continue to keep changing lyrics to make it TV friendly, and they're just bad. I can understand having to change the lyrics, because again, you're on primetime TV. You can't say certain things, but the way that they changed them just ended poorly. The next song is Santa Fe, which is Collins' first big song, and it's my favorite song from the show. That and the Reprise are my two favorite songs from the show. And Collins is my favorite part in the show because he's a baritone like me. And Santa Fe is this beautiful song where he starts out in this nice, really low baritone range and goes up to this really nice tenor range. The actor playing Collins doesn't have a low range. He's a tenor, which is just a bad casting decision. You should not be casting a tenor for a baritone singing part. You just shouldn't do that. And so Collins kept trying to hit these low notes and couldn't. And so he bottomed out and sounded just like a frog croaking. And then he would change certain parts to speaking because he couldn't sing the low notes. And that just, it didn't work because the song is this beautiful song. He just spoke half of it. The balance keeps changing over and over where sometimes the band would be overpowering them. Sometimes it'd be so quiet you couldn't hear it. And the chorus, who sings with Collins during the middle of Santa Fe, was like whispering the entire time. You could barely hear them. And that's where the meat of the accompaniment comes from. That's where all the harmonies come from. You couldn't hear them. And then there's also this other part towards the end of Santa Fe where Collins does this really cool vocal run where he gets to go really, really high and do these really cool runs in that. And the guy that played Collins on Broadway just owns this part. Like, this is Collins' moment. And the guy playing it here just died. He had like 2 or 3 notes in the entire thing and just kept repeating the same 2 or 3 notes for this entire run. And it just sounded bad compared to the beautiful vocal run that you're used to hearing. It was just and it was just, no, why would you do that? It was a beautiful song. They butchered it. Angel comes in every so often in the song, and again she can't hit her pitches over and over again, and she's not supporting her voice. It just comes off poorly, which is, again, really sad because the actress herself was really good in the show. Whenever she wasn't singing, she was the center of the show, and center of the scene. Like, she was gorgeous and perfect in the role, and just could not sing for the life of her. The next song is a duet between Collins and Angel, and it's called "I'll Cover You," and it's actually decent. Like, they do these nice harmonies in that, and then it gets to a part where Angel's falsetto comes back, and it's horrid. And then towards the end of the song, those beautiful harmonies just die, and it ends on a really bad low note. And one of the things with Collins is one of the most difficult parts vocally to sing in the show, because he has to have a really wide vocal range where he can go all the way from low baritone to really high tenor and into falsetto. And the actor doing this doesn't have a lower range. He didn't really have an upper range either. And his performance just kept falling flat because eventually I'm assuming the vocal director realized he couldn't sing the high notes and he couldn't sing the low notes. So they started just removing those parts and letting him sing alternate melodies that were a little more in his range. And it came off bad. It came off really flat because you have this beautiful wide range song and then they reduced it to less than an octave. And it was just really bad. Joanne has this really great song where she's on the phone with like 2 or 3 different people, and on multiple phones. She does it beautifully. She's projecting. She's singing well. There's emotion. It was such a refreshing part of the show to see an actress just getting into her character, singing well. It was so great. And then there's this part that comes up over and over again where they go, "Christmas bells are ringing, Christmas bells are ringing, and they get some weird dissonant harmonies in there that are supposed to be dissonant, and somebody says singing instead of ringing. And it's really obvious because they have an ear-piercing voice. I don't know if that was intentional or not. I'm not as familiar enough with the show to know, but it came off bad. Mark and Roger have a little duet between them, and they sound like they're straining every time they sing to each other. They sound like they're pushing themselves far beyond what they can do vocally, and it comes off as just painful. And then again, anytime there's a song with counter melodies and things in it, it comes off bad. The balance is always wrong. You're hearing the wrong notes because they're amplifying the wrong people, or the band is playing over them, and it's bad. And then there's a scene where Roger kind of throws the drug dealer away, and it's just so badly choreographed and badly staged that he's just like, "Muh," and then the drug dealer's like, "Whoa!" flies away. Like it was bad. As soon as Maureen shows up, and again, I'm going to call her Maureen, but for reference, I was Vanessa Hudgens, by far the most famous person on stage, and the only actor that I was actually aware of who they were before. A lot of the other actors had pretty impressive resumes, but Vanessa Hudgens is an icon. She shows up, the audience screams, which again is a rock concert thing to do. It is not a theater thing to do, and it was annoying. And as she comes on, she owns the stage. I was a little bit upset because I really would have preferred Vanessa as Mimi. I think she would have done a great job as Mimi, and Mimi is a little bit bigger role. Maureen is a supporting character. Mimi's a lead. But oh, damn, did Maureen just kill it. Her first song is Over the Moon, and she's this performance artist. Wow, does Maureen just kill it the entire time. Her voice is strong and supported. She hits all the notes right. She has such energy and just everything about her performance. She is by far the highlight of the show at that point is her performance. And then Rent, again, most of Rent, you have these really impressive like belting notes in that. Every time Vanessa hits a brilliant note, Maureen hits a brilliant note, the audience screams and ruins it. And again, there was nothing she was doing wrong, which is another reason why I kind of lean on the idea that I'm pretty sure it was the actors didn't know what they were doing as opposed to monitors not working well, because Vanessa was brilliant. Maureen was brilliant the entire time. She really didn't have a bad note. It's possible because again, this isn't even her first live performance doing one of these live shows. She was in Greece last year, I think. So it's possible she just understood and was more comfortable working with in-ear monitors because performing with in-ear monitors is a skill. It's not something that everyone can do, and you have to work and train to be able to do it correctly. So it's, to give these guys an out, it's possible they just didn't learn how to work with in-ear monitors. It's very difficult to do because you hear your voice being projected into your ears. It's confusing. So maybe that's what it was. But when you see Vanessa on there, Maureen just owning it, it makes everyone else, it really shows how poor everyone else on stage was. Going that. Then we go into the finale of Act 1 is La Vie Bohème. And it's such a fun song. It's such a great song, and it falls so flat. First of all, they had to change a bunch of the lyrics because, again, not family friendly. The beginning of it, you have Mark come on, and he goes, "Dearly beloved, we're gathered here to say our goodbyes." And right then, you have Mark and Collins come on, and they do this really awesome D-A-C, re, D-A-C, da. Really great bass. Oh dear God, it hurt so bad. They couldn't sing the notes. They couldn't get near them. They just bottomed out, and it sounded so bad. Nobody in the cast had a low range. Everybody were, you literally had an entire cast of belting altos, sopranos, and tenors, and that's not how you cast a Broadway show. You have baritones and basses in there. They have very important parts, and there's just no one that could sing it. The other thing that was weird, again, their set was designed in kind of what's called theater of the round. They had audience everywhere. The first part of La Vie Boheme is iconic because on the stage show they just have this really, really long table, and like Last Supper style, they have everyone sitting on one side and the audience is over here because they use a style of theater called proscenium, where you have the theater here, the audience here, and the audience looks this way, and that's it. They use the proscenium setup for La Vie Boheme in a theater of the round setting. So about half the audience for the first half of La Vie Boheme only got to look at butts. That's all they did. They just got to sit there staring at butts. And the actors all played to the camera that kept moving around. But half the audience couldn't enjoy the first half of this really fun song. And then the one kind of naughty lyric they were able to get away with was there's a sign, or there's a part of it where they goes, mucho masturbation. And it was so bad. Like, again, Mark was singing it, and he sang it out of tune and pitchy, and his voice cracked. Balance was still a big issue where you weren't hearing the harmonies you were supposed to, and the chorus was either too loud or too quiet, and it was bad. And then Collins delivers this really great part where they're going, they're giving toast to everything, and he comes in and goes, to marijuana, and it just came off as to marijuana. It just came off so bad. And again, they had to change a bunch of the lyrics, and it didn't work. The lyrics were so crazy different from the lyrics that we're all used to hearing, those of us that are familiar with Rent, that you couldn't you couldn't get used to the changes. And even people that hadn't heard it, the lyrics were just poorly written. I can't even remember most of them. They were so pointless, whereas I can sing almost the entirety of La Vie Boheme by heart. And could after like the second time hearing it, because it was such a really cool, interesting song. Then Mimi and Roger go off and do a little duet called I Should Tell You. Roger can't find the beat in the beginning of the song, and the song itself is very syncopated, meaning instead of singing on the downbeats, you sing on the upbeats, and so it comes off very kind of jazzy and cool, and he can't get it at all. He's hitting downbeats and upbeats, and it just comes off bad. And then throughout the entire thing, Roger just keeps petting Mimi. He pets her arm, he pets her, like, it just comes off as massively creepy and forced, because it's not natural. There are scenes where you see like the characters kind of petting each other lovingly. It wasn't that. Like, they weren't close enough for him to be like petting her. He was like doing this. And it was so creepy for the entire song. Finally, though, Mimi and Roger get into a groove. In the second half of I Should Tell You, you have these beautiful harmonies. They're singing to each other. The creepy petting is still going on. But the rest of it is really good, and I like that. The second half of La Vie Boheme, instead of using like a straight table where half the audience just sees butts, they rearranged the tables so that they were in a circle, and the stage started spinning. That was really cool. It was a great way to do theater of the round and to be able to do that particular song and still let the entire audience do it. I don't know why they didn't do that in the beginning. It was just bad. Mark, in La Vie Boheme, just still cannot hit his notes. And La Vie Boheme is Mark's feature piece. Mark gets a lot of solos and things like this, but La Vie Boheme is probably his most well-known song because he leads the entire cast in this song, and he just can't do it. And then at the end of Act 1, normally you have this really big thing where it goes, Viva la vie bohème! And you have this huge, what's called a stinger from the band. A stinger is basically that last note that happens after the song ends. It's just bum. The stinger in this was just a single piano chord, and it just fell flat. You have this huge triumphant song that was poorly sang throughout, but they finally get into the groove of it, and you have this huge triumphant song, and then just a single chord. It just it ended Act 1 on such a low note. When we come back, Mark starts off Seasons of Love B, which is the opening to Act 2. And he's actually hitting his notes pretty well. He's still not projecting. He's still not supporting his voice, but he's hitting the right pitches, which is important. And the mic helps a little bit with the fact that he's not projecting correctly. So that was better. Seasons of Love B was technically the opening we're used to seeing at the beginning of Rent, where they have all these really cool solos. And the facilitator of life support takes what's normally Joanne's solo, and she can't hit the notes correctly at all. Like she hits the wrong notes. Her voice cracks. It turns out really, really bad. And she actually does support her voice and everything. So it comes off even worse because you can actually hear all of the bad notes. All of the solos in Seasons of Love B were just bad. Nobody hit the right notes. Everybody's voices were cracking. It was horrible. And at the end of the song, the facilitator, that solo is supposed to be doing measure your life in love. She can't find the beat, and so she's like, measure your life, measure your. Like, she has a stutter like I do, and like, ugh, it was bad. Then we get again we have more of Mimi still struggling to find notes. Maureen comes on. Where they're trying to break into their flat and everything. Maureen comes on and she's still carrying the show. Every time she's on, she's hitting her marks. She's hitting her notes. She's belting out these gorgeous tones. It was amazing. Really, really loved it. And yeah. And then what's happened is they in the show they've locked them out of their flat, and they have a chain on it. Angel comes on and has a blowtorch, which is cool. It's fine. They had a real blowtorch on stage, and she turned it on. That is terrifying. Nothing happened with it. Nothing bad happened, but that is not a prop I would ever want in a stage show. To have a live blowtorch, actually, like you can have a real blowtorch that's not on. There's just so many things that could have gone wrong that didn't. That scared me. And then what happens is they cut everything off and they push this metal door down, which they didn't have to do. They could have just, because it's a sliding door, is what they've created. So they could have just slid it, but no, they dump it on the ground and it hits the stage, and it's so obviously not metal. It is a flat made probably of canvas and 2x4s. Which is what most flats are made of. So when it hits the ground, you don't hear this metal thud like you're thinking. You just hear this kind of, and it's just so bad. The next song, one of the most popular songs, definitely the most popular karaoke song from the show, is "Take Me As I Am." And they had this really weird accompaniment behind it. I don't know what it was. It might have just been they chose different instrumentation or something, but it sounded off for some odd reason. And it's a duet between Maureen and Joanne. And again, Maureen just shows off that she is by far the best vocalist on stage, over and over again. And the audience keeps screaming whenever she hits a super cool note, which ruins everything. And then Joanne comes in, and she's great. She comes off, she's got a strong voice. She's holding her own against Maureen, which no one has done in the entire show thus far. They get to the part where they're singing harmonies between the two, and they're great. They're absolutely phenomenal. There was a couple rough spots where they didn't quite hit the harmony perfectly, but even those were easy to overlook when you look at the entire song, and it came off brilliantly. And that was the kind of thing I was expecting from the show, was that. Yeah, so that was good. And then it goes to Roger and Mimi break up, and she sings her kind of feature song. You Take Me or Out Tonight is her first. That's her introduction song, and that's her really good one. She did poorly on that. And then Without You is her other really good feature song. And they went and the camera went in so tight and so close to her that you could only see like part of her face. It wasn't even like a close-up where generally a close-up you'll get like from here up. It wasn't. It was like here, and you would just get these weird angles of her. Again, acting is not just, you don't just use your face, especially on stage. You very rarely just use your face. You have your entire body that you use to express your emotions. And they just robbed her of all of her ability to project her emotions by just focusing on these weird cuts of her face. And then, again, Mimi kept falling into the trap of she was relying on the mic too much, and she wasn't in the song. Like, the song is really sad and very introspective, and she just looked like she was singing a song, like you would at a recital. She wasn't acting at all, and it was just bad. And then this was something that just was weird to me. They have a bunch of different beds on stage at this point because they're doing kind of a montage type thing. Everybody keeps laying in beds upside down. Like, they'll put their feet on the pillows and put their head at the other end. It was weird because it happened over and over again. It happened with Mimi. It happened with Collins and Angel. And it was weird. Overall, Without You was not horrible compared to the rest of the show. Mimi was still at least hitting her notes. She wasn't supporting her voice very well, and so some of the notes would just drop out, but she wasn't hitting the wrong notes. And then the next song is called Contact, which is basically where Angel dies, and oh, wow. It was like a bad 90s rap video. Like, it was such a weird... Now, I will be honest, that one's not in the movie, which is the version I'm most familiar with, and I can't remember what the stage version is like normally. So it's possible that they were just doing an homage to the stage version that I just didn't know. But it was a weird show, and a weird part of the show. And at the very end of it, Collins delivers this beautiful line. He says it's over because Angel has passed, and it was beautifully done. He bursts into tears. He has so much emotion behind that. That's the kind of things that you want from a show like this. Just be overwhelmed with emotion. The funeral scene is the best acting any of the characters do in the entire show. Everyone is into their characters, and they're reliving these stories, and there's so much emotion and everything. And then Collins comes in, and this is his other huge feature. This is my favorite song. It's the reprise of I'll Cover You. And like I said, Santa Fe is one of my favorites. This is my hands down favorite because it starts off just beautiful and low and goes up high, and you just get to experience so much emotion in it. Collins can't hit the low notes. he tries again. It would be better if he just wouldn't try, but he does, and he bottoms out every single time. And then he makes some interesting choices. He doesn't follow the melody that you generally do. He redoes the melody. The choices he make sense, and he uses a lot of rubato. I didn't like them, but they made sense, which basically means I would have done it differently. But they weren't bad choices. They were different choices, and I don't think personally that they worked. But it's a personal opinion, not a thing. Like if you're not hitting the notes, that's a fact. You're doing things poorly. When you're making choices that don't work, that's very much an opinion. It's based on who's hearing it. So that's just, take it or leave it. The next song is Halloween. Mark opens like the first half of the song, and he does really well. This is the first time you really see Mark singing and really doing well, hitting all the notes, supporting his voice a little better. It was great. And this is where I start seeing the cast really start to get into it, and I'm like, okay, wow, this must be it. It must be they just weren't really into it at the beginning of the show, and they're finally getting into their groove. And then fake Adam Pascal shows up, and I'm like, fuck this, really. And it's at this point I'm actually looking to see how much of the show is left, because I'm that checked out at this point. But I have to finish it. The last note in Halloween cracked and lost tune, so again, bad singing. Roger keeps imitating Adam Pascal. He won't make the character his own, and it's bad over and over. But then Goodbye Love is this really beautiful duet between Roger and Mimi, and it's good. Maybe that's the song before. Anyway, Roger and Mimi have a really great duet there, and then Mimi goes into Goodbye Love and does that. And then Mark is doing a lot better. And he's singing the beginning of What You Own, and then the chorus part of What You Own comes in, and he loses pitch and vocal support, and then the audience starts screaming, and it ends. It's so bad. They scream as soon as Roger comes back on stage, and it's so bad. Roger and Mark are on opposite sides of a really large room, because the stage is massive, and the audience is in different spots all over. And so their harmonies would be difficult for good vocalists. For these guys, it didn't happen. They came off really bad. And the most frustrating part of it was you had this glimpse of really good what it could be. There were these tiny little glimpses where they were in tune. They were singing to each other. Like everything was working well, and then it would go back to how they've been singing the entire show. And so it made the good parts made the bad parts that much worse. And then the end of the song, they fall into one of these pits where the audience just stands there, and that freaked me out, because I'm like, you're crowd surfing in a theater. That's a bad idea. But I realized later they probably like put the cast into the pit for where they fell to make sure these guys wouldn't get hurt. So that's what they did, and it was okay. It was again, it was an interesting way to use the audience as part of the show. But again, because of poor direction, just poor utilization of the set, it didn't work. Then they have a phone call with Mark's mom. Let's try it again. Mark's mom was so out of tune and so offbeat that it ruined the other three actors who were doing a really good job in that part. Finale A comes in, and it's brilliant. Everyone is getting into it. Mimi is still not supporting her voice, so it's not carrying over the rest of the cast. And Maureen is still showing up everybody with just how talented she is on stage. Roger keeps missing notes over and over and over again. And this is when I realized this is actually live, because Roger has his foot in a cast. So I'm like, okay, cool. I'm actually seeing a live performance instead of the pre-recorded one before. So that's cool. Or I'm watching a recording of a live performance, whatever. And he sings "Your Eyes," which is Roger's song. He's been writing the entire show, and he does it well. Like, I mean, there's a couple pitch issues, but nothing glaring enough that I would have an issue with it. And it's one of those things like, wow, finally Roger does something well, and it was refreshing. Even though he's singing well, he still feels like he's imitating Adam Pascal, though. Like, he's still putting that really fake gravelly part that works in this section, but it doesn't feel natural. Then finale B comes in, and it starts off really strong. Then Mimi starts struggling with her pitches again. And then the whole cast starts coming on stage for curtain call as part of finale B. Angel coming back on was beautifully done. I had a tear in my eye. I thought it really wrapped your heartstrings up and pulled on them. And then they do Seasons of Love at the end, and they brought, I believe, the entire original Broadway cast came back, including Adam Pascal, and they sing Seasons of Love with the original Broadway cast. It was super cool. It did not do the live cast any favors because you had Broadway professionals here just showing you why they're Broadway professionals. You had Anthony Rapp, Idina Menzel, Jesse L. Martin, who played Collins on Broadway. Just again, brilliant singers doing amazing things. Jesse L. Martin specifically sang his solo and just so beautiful. Idina Menzel was struggling a little bit because she was singing a solo that she doesn't normally sing in the show. Idina Menzel played Maureen on Broadway, and generally that solo is given to Joanne. So I don't know why she was singing it, but she wasn't really hitting it right. She also did not have monitors in, so it's very possible that she couldn't find her pitch because she couldn't hear herself. Generally, I will give Idina Menzel a pass because she's Idina Menzel. She has won multiple Tony Awards. She was Elphaba in Wicked. She was Maureen in the original Broadway one and the movie. She is one of the most prolific Broadway actresses currently working. So I'm fully okay with her screwing up one song. I'm certain if she had done the entirety of Maureen, she would have been perfectly fine, monitors or not. She's that good. And overall, finale B was well done. But I mentioned here, seeing the original cast and hearing them sing next to the live cast, you really understand how much of a letdown the live cast was compared to Broadway. And then the curtain call looked fun. You know, they all the actors are going around hugging each other. The Broadway cast is going through and hugging and talking to their. It was a cool ending to a rather disappointing show. So overall, I was not pleased with Rent Live. I've been watching these live shows that Fox puts on, live theater that Fox puts on, and they always do these things because, well, we're TV, so we can do things like at first they wouldn't have a live audience for the first like 2 or 3 of them. They wouldn't have a live audience. I'm like, why in the world would you not perform it for a live audience? That's theater. Why in the world would you not? And then they'll do weird camera stuff and they'll do all this other stuff because we're TV and we can do that. But they'd been getting better and better over the last few live shows. This show was just a massive step in the wrong direction. They used really bad camera work. There was a couple times when they were on gimbal cameras and just running around that I got motion sickness because the camera was shaking the entire time and moving too fast, and I literally got sick to my stomach. Overall, like the show was such a step in the wrong direction for these live theater shows. I want them to get more theater-like, not less. And I don't know why they keep thinking that that doing these weird camera angles that don't exist, and doing all these things that don't happen in theater, why they think that makes the show better. Because it doesn't. It hurts it every single time. When they did Grease, they literally had to drive the actors to different sets because they weren't changing sets like you would in a theater production. They had completely fully built sets in various places on the Universal or the Fox lot, and so they had a different audience for each set, or they would bus the audience, or I don't know how they did it, but they would literally, the actors would get off stage, jump in golf carts, and we'd be driven to the next set because they were that far away. Why would you do that? Grease is already a great musical that can be done on a single stage, and yet you had to make all these multiple stages just because, well, we're TV, so we can do that. So overall, I'm disappointed with this. I love Rent. I was really looking forward to this, and it did not turn out. And I think this was a step back for these live shows. I keep preaching, please just watch these shows to let them know that we want to see theater making a comeback and getting into the popular vernacular, even if it's just done through TV. This, I can't say that. They went a step in the wrong direction. I don't believe they should be congratulated or rewarded for that. They need to understand this was bad. And if they do this again, they need to understand that this is what makes theater good. And you know, if they want to make a film version of a Broadway show, you can do that. It's been done very successfully over and over and over again. Phantom of the Opera, Rent, Les Mis, Into the Woods. These are all very popular movies that made money and people loved them. But don't try and do this thing where we're going to make a TV show out of a stage show, but it's still going to be a stage. And just stop that. You had a really brilliant set that you destroyed and didn't use. You had almost an entire cast of people that could not hit their notes correctly, that could not find the beats. You had a band that was just weird. No one was on time. This was just a giant letdown. And the worst parts about it was there was beautiful parts in there that showed you what it could have been and wasn't. So, and anyway, that's all for me today. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.